Welcome to the Holding Hope podcast. My name is Pam Orr, and I am the Executive Director for Fellowship Housing, a nonprofit that empowers single moms. The Holding Hope podcast is a space for courageous single moms to share their journeys. Through their stories, we will explore the life-changing power of hope. Each of these women inspires me, and I know they will inspire you as well. I'm so glad you've decided to listen. Welcome to the Holding Hope podcast. My name is Pam Orr, and I am the Executive Director for Fellowship Housing, a nonprofit that serves single moms in the Chicagoland area. I will be your host today. I am so excited for you to meet today's guest, Julie. Julie is resilient, she's tenacious, and she's selfless. And she is the mom to 8-year-old Jace. She's here to share her story of facing her fears and achieving unimaginable goals. Julie, I'm so glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Would you mind just start by telling us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about Jace?
I am a teacher. I've been working with students that need extra support in the special ed fields, and Jace is 8 going on 9, and he goes to a private school named Trinity in Roselle. And we are adapting as a single mom raising Jace in the Bloomingdale, Illinois area and navigating life on our own.
Great. Wow. I'm so excited to be able to unpack your story and share it a little bit. Now, you and I met back in 2018 when you walked through the doors of Fellowship Housing.
Yes.
Would you mind, let's start and help our listeners get to know who you were before that day that you walked in the door?
It was during the winter. And I remember hearing about the program through a friend. I had a checklist. I had to have like X, Y, and Z in order, working 40 hours a week, having a car in order to be a part of this program. Those things sound easy and, you know, what most people do, but having a little 3-year-olds and being a single parent with limited resources, I was not able to work 40 hours at that time. So I had this checklist and I was going into Fellowship Housing to see if I could qualify and get on that waiting list at the time.
Okay. Let's take the listeners back. Let's take them back before you walked in the door. Tell us what brought you to that point in life. Tell us about who you were, what childhood was like for Julie, and then bring us up to the present.
Sounds good. I was raised in a large family of 7 kids in the city of Chicago, total of 9. And it was a dysfunctional setting, small, tiny house and a bungalow house in Chicago. And we were fending for ourselves and we didn't have a lot of resources.
Help us to understand what daily life was like for you as a family.
Well, I was raised with my father who struggled with alcohol. He wasn't home that much. He was down the street at a local tavern. He worked hard at Dominic's Deli as a deli manager, and he had his own story of brokenness where it was really hard for him, as I learned later in life, to really run the house. So my mom also suffered from depression. So I would come home from school, she'd be laying on the couch and battling some grieving from a lost sister that she had at a young age. So I learned to help take care of myself, some of my siblings. We learned how to grow up really quick and become independent at a very young age.
That sounds difficult. Where did you fall in the 7 kids?
I was almost the baby of the family. I had an older brother who became a father figure in our house. He was the first to be led to the Lord through Awana clubs. He would come home and help coach us on scripture and knowing that we need the Bible, and we would have Bible study in the house while my mom was downstairs and my dad was at the bar. We would be upstairs having a Bible study, and he was very instrumental in helping coach each one of us at that time. It was very hard.
What a gift to have him be present and be a part of your life at that time.
Yes.
Yeah. How did that season of your life, now you're years ahead of that time in your life, how did that shape who you became and who you are today?
After having the influence of Awana clubs and through my brother setting that healthy example in darkness, I made choices like choosing to go to a private Christian school for college. I didn't get encouraged to do that by my parents. They didn't care where I was going. They said, you're on your own, you pay for your own school. I financed and took care of all of my bills, finances, everything at a very young age, and made those decisions by myself. And that was from the influence of my brother setting that example and through special mentors from church.
Okay. Wow. Talk to me a little bit about the events that led up to Jace coming into your life.
Although I had these healthy influences in that dark period of my life, I went through my ups and downs. I had times where I didn't make healthy choices, dated guys that weren't the best choice for me. I went through a time period where after my father had passed, I just felt pressured to get married. I was dating online, met someone, and he said he was a Christian. So I thought I was making the right choice, just knowing that he was a Christian, but he had asked to marry me a lot sooner than planned. And so we quickly got married after a couple of months, and I relocated to Nebraska, gave up my car, my teaching position, and married a stranger.
How old were you at this time?
I wish I can say that I was like 18. It would make so much sense. But no, I was in my 30s and made that decision.
Okay.
And in that moment, it sounded healthy for me, knowing that he was a Christian, his parents were Christians. And after a couple of months of being married to him, I thought I would be with this healthy family out in Nebraska and my problems would go away from the past. And it wasn't. It turned to a man filled with abuse, anger, and his own battle of not dealing with his past trauma and taking it out on me. So I quickly needed to get into counseling in Nebraska. And so I was in some trauma treatment and was confronted by a therapist that I was married to an abuser and never thought that that was coming.
Was that a surprise to you when they said that to you?
It was a tough surprise. And when that all unpacked in a short window of time, I was already pregnant.
Okay.
And so during that time, here I am thinking, oh, I'm a Christian. And I learned all these great values. I went to a Christian school and did what I could to make healthy choices and be in God's word. What I had learned was how there was this trauma that I needed to work through. And what I really thought about myself was, there's basically pieces that I needed to unpack to determine why I made the choices that I did. And I was challenged by a therapist that was a Christian in Nebraska and just said, you are married to someone that is not well. He's not treating you well. This is abusive. You need to leave him. So that was tough.
That sounds tough.
Yeah.
What did your support system look like? So when the therapist said to you, you need to leave him, this is not a healthy situation. What went through your mind? What emotions were you feeling at that time?
when that was presented to me, most people would think, oh, you have this big family, they could take care of you. What I had learned was when I would reach out to my siblings, they had trauma. We all went through the same households, and everyone handles that differently. We were raised through abuse, through neglect, alcoholism, depression, and I wasn't able to reach out to them. Some of my siblings are married to abusers still. And that was where I started. It was an eye-opener for me, was my resources were very limited because I would be going back to Chicago. And if I asked for help when I did, some of my family members said, why would you leave him? You guys can work it out. A few fights, that's not bad. And that was when it was a turning point for my life, an eye-opener. And it was like, I have a lot to do in my life, a lot of healing. I need to be with Jesus. There's what I thought, this nice Christian guy, and just how I was a fool. And it was from all that trauma that wasn't dealt with. Yeah. So
was Jace born when you left your husband?
Reached out to my friends from Awana clubs and my friends from my college that walk closely with Jesus. And I was trying to do the best to make a healthy decision. Should I go with my family who had talked me back to going to Nebraska, which I tried? Because it's interesting how you go by default in your trauma, like what you're comfortable with. It's easy to go back to Nebraska. So I did fly in from Chicago after a few hits and a few awful fights. I shouldn't have ever returned. But my family's message was tough it out. So I did go back, and after a week, it happened again. There was an abusive cycle, and I was able to finally detect it on my own. When I was back there a second time, that was when I was leaning heavily into my healthy support. And those were my Christian friends from church. And they helped me so much. So, and they played a role into fellowship housing too.
Okay. We'll get to that.
Yes.
You said you had healthy friends out in Nebraska. Right? Or were they back here in Chicago? In Chicago. Yes. Okay. So you're still in Nebraska. Right. You're reaching out to friends from Chicago who are speaking truth.
Yes.
Showing you a mirror.
Yes.
About what is really happening. Okay. At some point, you make the decision to leave your husband.
Yes.
For good.
Yes.
Tell me what challenges you faced when you made that decision.
I had to face finances, and knowing that he comes from a wealthier background, I would be leaving a house with granite countertops. I would be leaving knowing that I have a baby that's coming because I was pregnant, and I would have to financially support him 100%. And that scared me. But after going there that second time and knowing that that was clearly an abusive cycle, and I started seeing and feeling the damage and the patterns, identifying all those patterns, that was when I knew I needed to leave. And it was at any cost. And that was, at that time, I remember getting on an airplane and I had $39 in my checking account. And that was it. Nothing else. And I couldn't go to my family because they wanted me to go back to Nebraska. It was embarrassing. It was hard to face them. And also being around them, it was showing that it's okay to be around people that are crossing your boundaries.
It's embarrassing. Talk to me about that. You said, yes. I couldn't go back to my family. It was embarrassing. Tell me about what that feeling was for you.
It was, part of the embarrassment was knowing that I, on my own, had this wedding and got married and made that choice. And my mom's advice was, you made your bed, you sleep in it. And that was tough love. And yes, there's some truth to, yes, we make decisions and we should be held accountable. But when you go through an abusive childhood and you're not able to clearly think about those things, and that's an awful statement to say to somebody. So that
Julie,
was tough.
What were you feeling when you heard that statement from your mom?
when she said that to me it helped me know in that moment, because I remember that moment, the room I was in when she said that. It was a moment of, I now know why I left to quickly make a decision to marry a stranger, and knowing that my attachment and the way I was raised in that dysfunction, and why I would quickly do something that was so unwise. And it helped me know that she isn't a person that's safe, that I could grow with and heal with and return to from Nebraska. She was basically an image of like my mom. My mom reminded me of who I married. I married my mom, somebody that was unloving, boundary crossing, tough love, and harsh.
Wow. I was just going to say, I'm going to offer you a Kleenex.
Thank you.
So you're on an airplane. You've decided to leave for good. You have $39 to your name. Where are you going? You can't go back to family. Where are you going?
So with the 7 siblings, many of them had, their own issues, but I did have one brother that tried to make the healthiest choices. So he opened his door to me. Okay. So I did have a brother that was tough, because I had to live with him. And I was able to see patterns of how he and I were raised and how that was going through like his marriage, and knowing that this is temporary. I can't stay at this house forever. Right. So that was when my resources were running out.
You were getting to the end of the rope.
I was getting to the end of the rope because yes, when you're in a crisis, you could maybe find a friend or two, but to rebuild my whole life by myself and to only have $39, it would take a lot more than just that. And I've learned that a lot of people that live around us, they're not going to take you in for free. I didn't even have a salary at the time. I was getting ready to deliver. I couldn't work that much. Right. And so I didn't have enough to pay for rent on my own. And that was when so many people said, oh, you have this big family. Why don't you live with all these people? But what people don't know is the reason why you get yourself into these situations. It's like this circle, or I don't know how best to describe that, but
it's a cycle. It's a pattern that gets repeated.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. As small children, we often don't know the environment that we're living in and the effect of that environment on us, right?
You think everything's normal until you take yourself out and look from a different perspective. So it was a lot of lessons along the way, a lot of learning. And I'm still growing and learning. So
I'm glad to hear that. We should all be in that mode.
Yes.
So you go back to live with your brother. You can't stay there long. You're about to have a child. Yes. You have no income. You have a college degree.
Yes.
Correct. You've got a bachelor's in education.
Yes.
So you've got some abilities and some resources to pull on there. What took place in the next few months? Were you able to stay with your brother through the birth of Jace?
Yes, I was able to stay with him, but I couldn't work the 40 hours a week. Part of why I couldn't work was I was needing to heal. I just remember the word healing, like I need to heal. Actually, Jace's name is named, when you look up the research of Jace, it means healing. Because while I was pregnant and during that whole time with my brother, I was just like, I just want to be left alone. I don't want to be living with family anymore, because I started to see all these patterns around me. I was getting triggered by it. And then I had my ex trying to get me to come back again. And I was dealing with the verbal abuse and the awful words he would call me in my head and all the negative voices and the choices I made, and then having this wedding and coming back to having to share my story, and also coming back to be vulnerable and needing help. And in Chicago, that's not easy to just be like, hey, I'm basically homeless and wanting to you want to hide and you don't want anyone to know. And so I was broken and shattered and needing to heal. So how am I supposed to just all of a sudden go to work 40 hours a week and put a smile on my face? Yes, I did start working a little bit at a time. I worked at like a daycare, like couple, maybe 20 hours a week. But I remember like, I can't mentally be capable of running a classroom and being around children. It wouldn't be appropriate or healthy. It was just like, I can only do a little bit as I'm healing.
One of the themes that I've heard your story before, is this theme of fear. You've talked a lot about that in your speech, and I don't know if you recall that or not. When you graduated from fellowship housing, the speech that you gave. Talk to me about the role that fear was playing in your life at this time.
I had fear of not being able to take care of my son by myself. And I knew that I needed that because I wanted to have space for he and I and not be a burden in living with someone else, and I just felt like this awful burden to somebody else.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear how you got from that point to fellowship housing, because fellowship housing has some pretty straightforward requirements. Yes. You must be working full time. You must have some form of transportation. You need to be making a certain amount. Obviously, it's not a super high amount, but a certain amount so that you can begin to work on your financial literacy. How did you get from where you were right at that moment to being welcomed into the fellowship housing family?
So after I gave birth to Jace, and although the challenges of being with my brother and being with family, it was hard. It was a blessing because I was able to, little by little, each step of the way, start increasing my hours and get to a place where I was working 40 hours a week. During this process, my ex took my car away. So I didn't even have a vehicle. It was his way of trying to control and see if I would come back. I then went to Willow Creek in the cars ministry, and I was determined. I was blessed with this amazing little red car that got me, that was part of that vehicle to get me moving forward.
Yeah.
So I was able to check those two off my list and get back into the doors after 2 visits. Heather was like, you need to add 10 more hours. And by next week, if you work 40 hours, we will accept you.
Okay.
So it was a process. It was not easy. And then I finally had the vehicle and was able to get accepted finally in the fellowship housing program.
Okay. So let's dig in there. First of all, how did you find fellowship housing? How did you hear about it? And what motivated you to actually take those steps, which weren't easy, to take you to the point where you were able to get started with us?
Yes. Well, I heard about it from one of my friends from school.
Okay.
And she said, you need to just sign up. She had a friend that did the program, and now she's doing very well. She's independent. She graduated the program, and I heard this amazing success story from a graduate. And so she had told me about it. I looked it up online and researched it. And I said, this would be amazing to have like a discount on renting to give me the opportunity to be able to afford my son and I to have our own space for healing. So I knew that I was starting to heal and untangle the knots from that awful marriage. But now I needed a space in my own apartment. So it wasn't just an apartment. It was like this space of healing and freedom and being able to leave a dirty dish in the sink and not worry about having to clean it. So after that happened, I went ahead and I applied, and I was very motivated because the motivation was, do I want to stay with family members that are a part of that cycle? do I want to live in that, or do I want to be healthy and rebuild my son and I and have a new perspective, a new clean plate? And I was determined to surround myself with Christians with healthy goals.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a goal that I was wanting to conquer.
Do you remember walking into the apartment for the first time?
Oh, yes. I remember walking in and just like huge smile, knowing I have a key. I have an advocate that is going to help me. I'm not fully alone. I am able to have my own kitchen, a bedroom, and I can have my own space. And this is for my son and I. And knowing I had this advocate during this major awful experience that I'd went through helped me feel safe and peaceful about my next journey ahead of me, the 2-year program.
So you talked about your advocate. So when you begin with fellowship housing, you're immediately paired up with a buddy, with a family advocate, someone who's going to walk with you for the full 2 years. So you mentioned a family advocate. And you talked about, getting paired up with them. When you start at fellowship housing, we pair you up with kind of that buddy. What role did that family advocate play in your life over the 2 years?
When I first arrived, I had safety issues because my ex would follow me in Nebraska, where he was a physical threat.
Okay.
Where he was harming me physically. I remember telling my advocate, like, I'm scared that he might just show up in the next month or two. And I remember she said to me, we have your back and you are safe with us. Those words in that moment meant they spoke thousands and thousands of words. They gave me peace. And I knew that if I was stressed out or sad, I was able to connect with my advocate during that time. And looking back now, I can't believe how fear was set and how deep it was and how much fear I had about my safety. And just knowing that I have my own place and I have this advocate and this team of people and this program built around me, that was my favorite part of the whole program. And that's what got me to where I am today, was to have that support system. And the advocate was a huge part of my life and my journey.
That's wonderful. Okay. So I've got to share. Let me first ask you this before we share some of the numbers of what you accomplished during those 2 years. Share some of the specific goals that you had for yourself. So you're starting off on this new journey. You've got support around you. You've got your own space, a safe space where you can take a breath. What were some of the goals that you set? One of the things you do right off the bat, right, in meeting with your advocate is you set goals. What were some of the goals that you set for yourself? Do you remember back?
Yes. Well, one of the goals was to save a certain amount of money. And that was hard because I wasn't really making a lot. I was like, how is this going to happen? So it was saving money. And my other goal was to heal and feel confident to move forward. So it was all about healing.
Great. Okay. So
yes,
during your time with fellowship housing, you were able to pay off, you came in with about $6,000 in debt, which is mainly legal fees, right?
Yes.
So you paid off all $6,000 in debt. You saved $30,000. Wow. And you were only in fellowship housing for 1.5 years, correct?
Yes.
You didn't even stay the full 2 years.
No.
How in the world were you able to hit those two numbers?
Well, I have to give credit to fellowship housing because I was able to get the support I needed to reach those goals. Okay. And that program reminds me of the importance of surrounding yourself with healthy people because the accountability and the support was there to help cheer me on. The goals of saving after my awful experience helped motivate me. Knowing that I had a son that I needed to care for, that helped motivate me. Knowing that I need to do this, I need to buy a place for us. And I don't need to have to rely on family members or get stuck in a situation like that. So all of those reasons helped motivate me.
So I remember really clearly, and I can remember sitting down in my office and you coming in when you came into the office one time. And one of the things, if I recall correctly, was we were encouraging you to increase your income. I think you came in making $26,000, which you knew and we knew was not going to sustain you post fellowship housing. And at this time, you had a bachelor's degree in education and you were working at a preschool.
Yes.
Is that correct? And I can remember your advocate saying to you, you can do so much more than this.
Mm-hmm.
You can have your own classroom. And you pushed back.
I pushed back at first because I knew that from the trauma, from the divorce and the healing, it took such a toll on me that my confidence was limited from the abuse that I endured. And then also it was a wake-up call, like, where did this come from? This is linked to my past. So I had to deal with my trauma from childhood and the current trauma at the same time, which was part of the healing process. I had little confidence. And when she challenged me, it was hard. I needed to hear it. And I also knew that after I was with the program for over a year, I was at that place where I was ready to start applying and that my son would be okay. We are past the diaper stage and I'm ready to take on, a full-time job as a teacher.
One reason why we call this podcast Holding Hope, and this is a perfect example of that, is that all of us at Fellowship Housing are deeply committed to holding hope for the single moms that walk through the door, because so often, and you've just said this, it's really hard to have hope for yourself. It's really hard to believe in yourself because of the trauma, because of what you've experienced. And so that is a perfect example of you getting to a point, you said about a year in, where you were able to take from Brittany, your family advocate, the hope that she was holding for you and say, I'm ready. I'm ready. Does that seem like an accurate representation of what you went through that first year and where you came to?
Yes, it was. I just remember the beginning seasons I was running into these moms that were like, hey, I saved $22,000 and I would run into these moms at these fun events that they would have. And I was like, how did this lady over there do that? I'm never going to get to that goal. Yeah. And little by little, I was watching my bank account and it was just starting to grow. And and the bank account represented my healing, like my heart just starting to warm up and be more open and be more ready to take on that full-time job.
I think it's really profound what you just said there, Julie. We focus a lot on financial literacy and those numbers, the growing savings, decreasing debt. And that can seem a little cold. But the way you just said it, when you said, seeing my bank account increase was a marker for my healing.
Yes.
That's pretty profound.
Yes.
Anything else you'd care to say about that?
Yes. The tools that I learned with the financial literacy are lifelong. It's not just that program. I've been able to inspire others and share what I learned. That amount of money helped give me the confidence. And it was a marker when I got my key, not only from the fellowship housing apartment, but when I got my key for my home in Bloomingdale. And that was a celebration of what I did in those 2 years.
Yeah. Okay, so spoiler alert. Yes. No, that's great. Spoiler alert. You said I got a key to the fellowship housing apartment, but then I got a key to my own home.
Yes.
A year and a half later. All right. So let's step back just a bit because I want everybody to hear this. This is incredible. You paid off $6,000 of debt. You increased your savings to $30,000. I believe you doubled your income. Is that correct? You were making over $50,000 when you left, so you more than doubled during that time.
Yes.
You had your own classroom.
Yes.
Correct? So you started teaching, what grade did you start teaching?
I started teaching middle school special ed.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Okay. And then came graduation from fellowship housing and a house. How did that all take place?
Well, when I got that confidence to start applying, I was able to receive, a position while I was with fellowship housing. And in a short window, I was able to just take all of my checks and save them. And it allowed me to have enough money for a down payment for my own place after all of that.
What did that feel like walking in? It's one thing to walk into a place that is temporary, a place that's going to be healing,
Yes.
the fellowship housing unit that you moved into. But it's a very different thing, I would guess, to actually turn the key to a place that is your home.
Yes.
It's where you and Jace are going to grow and be safe. What emotions were going through when you started moving into your new home?
I felt empowered because I had my ex saying, "You can't leave me. You can't go anywhere because you need my finances." And he used that over my head. And that's why I did attempt to go back one time to that abuse, because I was afraid of having nothing. And when I had those keys to my new place, I remember all those negative voices and knowing I don't need to stay in this awful situation just for security while getting abused. I am able to now move forward and have my own healthy place and raise my son in a healthy Christian perspective, traditional Christian housing, and make those decisions on my own. My son doesn't need to witness the abuse. He never did. And he, as hard as it is to be a single parent, doesn't have to grow up in what would have been if I stayed there. It would have been very hard for him. He would have witnessed a lot of abuse. He would have witnessed me running in and out of and staying in hotels, which I did the first 3 months I was married. I was hopping hotels for safety at night, and he would find me in local hotels and then smooth me over soothe it and say, "Oh, things are going to be okay. Come back home." I would come back and then abuse would happen again. So after hopping hotels and family members' homes and needing that reliance to live elsewhere, when I had that key to my own place, it was more special, I would say, than most people when they get their key.
The saying that comes to mind is you've broken a cycle. You've broken a cycle. That's pretty incredible.
Yes.
I see. Tell me what you're experiencing right now.
I'm experiencing, those fruits from getting through that program and witnessing God's plan and knowing that He can heal and work through messy situations, making them better. And I have been able to offer hope to a lot of different women. I've gotten phone calls. I've had people ask me questions about fellowship housing. I've redirected many people because you think you're alone, but you don't. And I run into different people that are going through similar stories. I have met a lot of women that continue to stay in the abuse. They're too afraid to leave. They're afraid that they don't have those resources and they don't know that they're out there. And I encourage them to think about it. So I feel like I'm planting seeds from being a fellowship housing graduate. And I hope to continue to do that. I have an extra bed in my home. I've had families stay in my home, even though it's not a big house, it's a townhome. I have opened it up to anyone that needs to stay there, whether it's a night or a few months. And I've been able to just encourage people to know, hey, you can do this. If I can do it with $39 in my pocket, out of state, coming here to Chicago, anyone can do it.
That's wonderful. What are you most proud of as you look back on the last, 6 years now?
Wow. I'm most proud of knowing that my son is safe And knowing, hey, if I made the choice to go back to Nebraska and stay there and be a part of that cycle, or, what would life be like? And knowing that, sometimes he gets bored with me, like it's just, Mom, I'm bored. I would rather him be bored than staying in Nebraska and witnessing, his father hitting me, or me hopping hotels.
Yeah.
So that safe place means so much to me. And part of my home now is part of the fellowship housing process. If it wasn't for them, and if it wasn't for the support that I had circling around me, I would not have been able to buy my own townhouse.
Well, that may be true, but I also know, and I am so in awe of all that you've accomplished. Fellowship housing is a place where you were able to come and find safety and take a breath. But all of the hard work, all of the courage, that was all you. That was all you. All right. So as you look forward, what do you have set before you? What are some goals that you might have for your future? Some hopes?
Well, I would like to start a cookie baking online business. I've been trying to get that going, and I wanted to help donate some of that money to help other single moms. So I'm getting ready to launch that. I'm also a teacher, and my big focus is helping SEL, social emotional learning, and trauma informed, helping students and school districts to utilize those tools. Because when I went to school, I had a really hard time being a student when you're enduring, going home to a house that's chaotic. So my passion and place is to just help students that are struggling learners, encourage them and help them, with the tools to succeed. And my most recent project that I'm working on is my son and I are going to a missions trip this summer.
And tell me more about that. Okay. Tell me where you're headed.
We are heading with Wheaton Bible Church, and it's called Go Team Canada. We are going to be on an Indian reservation running a program that's similar to Vacation Bible School to help spread God's word. And it's a family vacation where my son can be shaped by people that are from the church that are walking closely with Jesus. And we are going to be fishing and hiking and having fun too, while we run a program to help other kids that come from trauma and broken systems, and allowing them to be a part of their Vacation Bible School curriculum and be exposed to God's word through games and memorization.
That's incredible. One of the words I used to describe you at the beginning was selfless, and you can see, those that are listening, I'm sure, can see very quickly why I use that word. Julie, it's been so good to have you here, to hear your story, to hear how really, truly God wastes nothing, to hear how he's taken the bits of your story and turned it for good. And the way that you're touching other people's lives is quite incredible. Not to mention the way that you've crafted a really beautiful life for Jace and are breaking the cycle. So thank you for your courage to come here and share your story. One final question, and you may have nothing to add, but if you do, a lot of times we have single moms that will listen to the stories. If there was someone listening who was living in a place of fear or doubt that she could do what you've done, what would you say to her?
I would say head to your nearest church and surround yourself with people that are surrendering and walking with Jesus to get that healthy perspective to help you make better decisions. And you got this. I know you can do it, because remember the girl from Chicago with $39 in her pocket and was able to now own property in Bloomingdale, Illinois, and my son is now in a private Christian school. So if I can do it, anyone can do it.
Thank you so much, Julie, for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Holding Hope podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation today, would you consider joining our community of followers in elevating the stories of incredible single moms like Julie? Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. If you know a single mom, a family member, neighbor, or even an acquaintance at your church or child's school, reach out. You may be the only one that's extending them hope at this time. Please introduce them to Fellowship Housing. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about Fellowship Housing, you can find us at fhcmoms.org on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Thank you once again for tuning in.